My wife served me divorce papers on my 35th birthday. My name is Eric Anderson, and I'm 35 years old. She sat across from me at our dining table, her expression cold as ice, and slid that manila envelope toward me like she was ending a business transaction. The shock hit hard, 8 years of marriage dissolving in an instant. But that shock turned to cold fury when I saw Dave Whitlock's name flash on her phone, the message preview revealing their entire conspiracy. My business partner, my wife, both plotting behind my back to take what I'd built. I didn't crumble. I didn't retreat into self-pity or weakness. Instead, I made a decision that would change everything. When someone tries to take what you've built, what's rightfully yours, they'd better be prepared for the consequences. This is the story of how I refused to be a victim, and instead became the architect of their downfall. But let me start from the beginning. Before I go any further, let me know in the comments where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow I will share a story you don't want to miss. I pulled into our driveway just past 9 that evening, my headlights sweeping across the perfectly manicured lawn we'd paid a fortune to maintain. The construction project had run late again, some issue with the foundation pour that needed my personal attention. Dave had left early, claiming he had dinner plans. I remember thinking he'd been doing that a lot lately. The house was quiet when I walked in. Too quiet. Usually Julia had music playing or the TV on, some background noise to fill the emptiness of our large suburban home. Instead, I found her sitting at our dining table, ramrod straight in one of those designer chairs she'd insisted we needed. A manila envelope sat in front of her. "Hey," I said, setting my keys on the counter. "Sorry I'm late. You wouldn't believe the day I had." Julia didn't smile, didn't stand up to greet me like she used to. Her blonde hair was pulled back tight, and she wore this expression I'd never seen before, cold, distant, like she was looking at a stranger. "Sit down, Eric." The tone sent ice down my spine. I sat. "I want a divorce," she said flatly, sliding the envelope toward me. "I've been unhappy for years. I deserve better than this marriage." The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. 8 years. 8 years of building a life together, and she drops this bomb on my birthday? Unhappy? I managed to keep my voice steady despite the shock coursing through me. "That's interesting timing, Julia, considering you seemed perfectly content last week when you dropped $3,000 on that shopping trip downtown." Her face flushed. "This isn't about money, Eric. You're never home, always at that office, always working late with Dave. I'm alone here." That's when her phone lit up on the table between us. The screen glowed with a new message, and I saw the name clear as day. Dave Whitlock, my business partner. The preview text showed just enough. "Did you give him the papers yet? Remember, don't mention anything about us or—" Something clicked in my brain. All those late nights Dave had been leaving early. Julia's sudden interest in asking about our business dealings. The way she'd started dressing up on days she knew Dave would be stopping by the house. I moved fast, grabbing her phone before she could react. "Hey!" Julia lunged across the table, but I held it out of her reach, scrolling through the messages. There it was. Weeks of conversations, plans, their affair laid out in black and white. "How convenient that you mentioned Dave," I said, my voice dropping to something cold and hard. "So this is what's been happening behind my back. You and my business partner planning to blindside me, hoping I'd sign away everything in shock. It's not what you think. Don't." I cut her off, standing up and towering over her. "Don't insult me by lying now. I can see everything right here. The plan, the timeline. How long has this been going on?" Julia's expression shifted from defensive to desperate. "Eric, please just listen." "Here's what's going to happen," I said, picking up the divorce papers. "You're going to leave this house tonight. And as for these?" I tore them clean in half, the sound sharp in the quiet room. "We'll be doing this on my terms now. You can't just—" "I can. This is my house, Julia. I paid for it. You want a divorce? Fine. But you're not taking me for everything while you run off with Dave." I watched her pack a bag 30 minutes later, her hands shaking as she threw clothes into a suitcase. She kept trying to explain, to justify, but I'd stopped listening. The woman I'd married didn't exist anymore. Maybe she never had. "I'm staying with Macy," she finally said, her sister's name bitter on her tongue. "Good. Give her my regards." After Julia's car pulled out of the driveway, I sat in my home office and dialed Gerald Wright's number, my lawyer, the man who'd handled every business contract for the last 5 years. He picked up on the third ring. "Eric?" It's almost 11. What's wrong? Gerald, I said, my voice steady and cold. I need everything you can get me on Dave Whitlock. Every business dealing, every transaction. And I need it fast. There was a pause. What happened? My wife just tried to ambush me with divorce papers. Turns out she's been having an affair with my business partner. I want to know what else he's been hiding from me. Gerald's tone shifted immediately. I'll start first thing tomorrow morning. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. And Eric? Document everything. Already started, I said, looking at Julia's phone still sitting on my desk. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Instead, I sat in my home office going through every photo on Julia's phone, every message between her and Dave. The betrayal cut deeper with each exchange, but I didn't let myself feel it. Not yet. There'd be time for that later. Right now, I needed to think. By 4 in the morning, I was dressed and heading to the office. The construction company headquarters sat in an industrial park on the edge of town, a modest 2-story building I'd bought 5 years ago when business really took off. I'd built this place from nothing. Every contract, every client relationship, every dollar earned, that was my work. And Dave had been stealing from me. The parking lot was empty when I pulled in. Good. I needed time alone with the financial records before anyone else arrived. I let myself into Dave's office first. His computer was still logged in, sloppy, but typical Dave. He always left things half-finished, relying on that easy charm to smooth over the details he missed. I sat down at his desk and started digging. It took me 20 minutes to find the first transfer, then another, then dozens more. $200,000. That's how much he'd siphoned out of our company accounts over the last 8 months. Small amounts at first, a few thousand here and there that could have been legitimate expenses. But they got bigger, bolder. The most recent transfer was just 3 days ago. $15,000 moved to an account I didn't recognize. I pulled up the bank statements and took screenshots of everything. Each transaction, each date, each routing number. My hands stayed steady as I worked, but my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. You ever trusted someone completely, only to discover they were robbing you blind the whole time? It's a special kind of rage that settles in your chest, cold, focused. I printed copies of everything and organized them in a folder on the desk. Then I sat back in Dave's chair and waited. Employees started arriving around 7:30. I heard them in the main office, coffee brewing, conversations about weekend plans, normal Friday morning chatter. Dave strolled in at 8:30, right on schedule. He was whistling, actually whistling, as he walked down the hallway toward his office. The whistling stopped when he saw me sitting at his desk. Eric? His face went pale. What are you doing here so early? Morning, partner, I said, my voice ice cold. Interesting night? Julia seemed pretty upset when she called you after our chat. Dave's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. Eric, listen, I can explain. Can you? I turned the computer monitor toward him. Explain this then. $200,000 in unauthorized transfers. Want to tell me where that money went? He stepped closer, his eyes widening as he scanned the screen. It was just temporary borrowing. I was going to put it back. Save it. I stood up, and Dave actually took a step backward. I've seen everything, Dave. The affair with my wife, the financial records. You've been stealing from our company, from me. Eric, come on. We've been partners for years. We're partners, I corrected him. Past tense. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number I'd saved earlier that morning. Officer Daniel Parker, a contact Gerald had given me when I called him at 6 a.m. Officer Parker? Yes, he's here now. I'd like to press those charges we discussed. Dave's face drained of all color. You called the cops? Eric, wait. We can work this out. No, I said flatly. We really can't. Officer Parker arrived 15 minutes later with another officer, a younger guy whose badge read Mitchell Torres. By then, I'd made sure every employee in the building knew something was happening. I'd walked Dave out to the main office area, the folder of evidence under my arm. Dave Whitlock, Officer Parker said, his voice carrying across the open floor plan. We need you to come down to the station to answer some questions about financial fraud. The office went dead silent. 12 employees watched as Dave stammered excuses, his face red with humiliation. I have the right to call my lawyer, Dave managed. You absolutely do, Officer Parker agreed. You can call from the station. They escorted him out through the main entrance. Dave kept looking back at me, his expression shifting between anger and desperation, but I just stared back with nothing in my eyes. No sympathy, no hesitation. The door closed behind them, and my phone started ringing immediately. 3 calls in the first minute, all from major clients who'd somehow already heard what happened. Word travels fast in this industry. The next morning, I sat in Gerald Wright's downtown law office while he laid out the battle plan. "They made a critical mistake," Gerald said, tapping his pen against a yellow legal pad. "If you'd signed those papers immediately, which is clearly what they were counting on, Julia would have had a legitimate claim to half your assets, including the company." I leaned forward. "But I didn't sign." "Exactly," Gerald smiled grimly. "Now we have time to build our case. The embezzlement gives us leverage, but we need to tie Julia directly to Dave's fraud. If we can prove she knew about it, participated in it, or benefited from it, her divorce claim falls apart completely. So we're fighting on 2 fronts," I said. "The business fraud and the divorce. Which is why you need specialized help." Gerald pulled out a business card. "Vilma Rodriguez. She's a rising star in high-stakes divorce cases, especially ones involving financial misconduct. I focus on the business side, she handles the personal side, and we coordinate everything." I took the card. The address was across town. "One more thing," Gerald added. "Document everything. Every interaction with Julia, every text message, every email. Assume nothing is private anymore." Vilma Rodriguez's office was smaller than Gerald's, but just as professional. She was sharp-featured, late 30s, with keen eyes that sized me up the moment I walked in. "Gerald filled me in," she said, gesturing to a chair. "Your wife serves you divorce papers on your birthday while having an affair with your business partner who's also embezzling from your company. That about cover it?" "That's the summary," I confirmed. "Good. Then let's talk strategy." Vilma opened a folder. "In most divorces, the goal is fair division of assets. In yours, the goal is proving Julia doesn't deserve a single penny because she participated in fraud against you. Can we prove that? That's what we need to find out." Vilma leaned forward. "Did Julia have access to company information? Did she know about the embezzlement? Did she help plan any of this?" "She knew about major clients," I said slowly, remembering. "I'd tell her about big contracts over dinner. She always seemed interested." "That's a start. I need you to gather every piece of evidence showing she had knowledge of company operations. Emails, texts, recorded conversations if possible. If we can demonstrate she knew Dave was stealing and said nothing, or worse, helped him, we've got her." I nodded, my mind already racing through possibilities. "And Eric?" Vilma's voice sharpened. "Don't do anything stupid. No confronting her directly, no threatening messages. Let the evidence speak for itself." That evening, I walked into my empty house and felt the silence press against me like a physical weight. Julia had taken personal items, clothes, jewelry, photo albums, but she'd left furniture, kitchen supplies, and apparently her laptop. I found it on her desk in the spare bedroom, still plugged in. My hands hesitated over the keyboard. This felt wrong somehow, invasive. Then I remembered her cold expression as she slid those divorce papers across the table on my birthday. I opened the laptop. She hadn't even logged out of her email. The first message I found was dated 3 weeks ago. Subject line, "Our plan." "Dave, Eric's been so distracted with the Morrison project he hasn't noticed anything. Once I serve the papers and he signs in shock, we can move forward with our timeline. I'll bring over the client list this weekend so you can start making contacts." My jaw clenched as I scrolled down. Another email, 2 days before my birthday. "I'm nervous about tomorrow night. What if he doesn't sign right away? We need that company access before he realizes what's happening. The sooner we can launch our competing business, the better." Dave's response, "Don't worry. He trusts me completely. By the time he figures out what we're doing, it'll be too late." I sat back, my hands shaking, not from fear but from cold rage. They'd planned everything, the affair, the embezzlement, the competing business. Julia hadn't just known about Dave stealing from our company. She'd been an active participant. I forwarded every relevant email to both Vilma and Gerald with a simple subject line, "Evidence." Then I closed the laptop and sat in the dark house, processing what I'd found. My phone rang, the screen lighting up with an unexpected name, Macy Taylor, Julia's sister. I stared at the phone for 3 rings before answering. "Macy?" "Eric, we need to talk," she said, her voice tight with something I couldn't identify. "About Julia and what she's been doing." The coffee shop Macy chose was on the edge of town, quiet and nearly empty at 9 in the morning. I spotted her sitting in a back corner booth, hands wrapped around a cup she hadn't touched. She looked like Julia, same blonde hair, same bone structure, but where Julia had always carried herself with calculated poise, Macy seemed genuinely uncertain. "Thanks for meeting me," she said as I slid into the booth across from her. "You said we needed to talk about Julia." "I did." Macy took a breath. "Eric, I can't support what she's doing. I know she's my sister, and family's supposed to stick together, but what she's doing to you, it's wrong." I stayed quiet, letting her continue. "Julia's been staying at my apartment since that night. I've been listening to her phone calls with Dave." Macy's voice dropped. "They're planning everything, Eric. How to steal your clients, how to set up their competing business, how to drain you dry in the divorce." "I found emails," I said. She left her laptop. "Then you know." Macy reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. "But you might not know all of it." I recorded some of their conversations. She set the phone on the table between us and hit play. Julia's voice came through clearly. "Dave, the Morrison contract is worth $500,000. Eric told me they're not happy with their current timeline. If you reach out to them right after the divorce finalizes, they'll jump to our company." Dave's response: "What about the Caldwell project?" "Same thing. Eric's been complaining about their budget restrictions. I'll give you the details. You can offer them a better deal and poach them before Eric even realizes what's happening." My hands clenched on the table. Macy stopped the recording. "There's more. Hours of it. Her sharing confidential information, discussing which clients to target first, planning how to use your business contacts against you." "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "She's your sister." "Because our parents raised us better than this." Macy's eyes were wet, but her voice stayed steady. "They taught us that honesty matters, that loyalty matters. Julia's forgotten all of that. I can't stand by and watch her destroy someone who doesn't deserve it. Julia will never forgive you for this." "I know." She pushed the phone toward me. "But I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror. Can you forward these to your lawyers?" "Absolutely." Macy stood to leave, then paused. "Eric, Julia thinks you'll eventually sign those divorce papers out of exhaustion. She's counting on you giving up." "I won't," I said, my voice cold. "Good." Macy managed a sad smile. "You deserve better than what she gave you." I sat in my car outside the coffee shop and immediately called Vilma. "We've got her," I said when she answered. "Julia's sister just gave me recordings of Julia sharing confidential client information with Dave. Everything they're planning." "Send them to me now," Vilma ordered. "This changes everything, Eric. If we can prove she actively participated in the plan to steal from your company, she won't get a penny." That evening, I had a business dinner scheduled with Emily Hernandez, one of my largest clients. I'd almost canceled, but Gerald had insisted I maintain professional appearances. Emily was waiting at the restaurant, elegant in a dark blue dress. She'd always been professional, but I'd occasionally caught a warmth in her smile that suggested she saw me as more than just her contractor. "How are you holding up?" she asked after we'd ordered. "Honestly, better than I expected. I heard about what happened with Dave and your wife." Emily's hand briefly touched mine across the table. "I want you to know, you still have my business and my support." Something in her tone made me look up. "Eric, I've known you for 3 years. I've watched you build an incredible company with integrity and skill." She met my eyes directly. "What Julia and Dave did to you, it says everything about them and nothing about you." "Thank you," I said, and meant it. "And when this is all over?" Emily's smile turned slightly playful. "I'd like to take you to dinner again, not as client and contractor, but as two people who might enjoy each other's company." For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than cold anger. "I'd like that," I said. "Good." Emily raised her glass. "Then let's talk about that expansion project you mentioned last month. I think it's time we moved forward with something bigger." As we discussed business and shared stories, I realized something had shifted. Julia and Dave had tried to destroy everything I'd built, but they'd only made me stronger. 2 weeks after Macy handed me those recordings, my life looked completely different. I'd spent every morning at the office, personally calling each client to assure them the company remained solid despite Dave's arrest. Most were surprisingly supportive. People appreciated honesty, and I wasn't hiding what had happened. My evenings belonged to Emily. We'd had dinner together 6 times in those 2 weeks. She made me laugh again, something I hadn't realized I'd stopped doing. Over Italian food and wine, she'd shared stories about growing up in Houston, about building her own business from nothing. "You're thinking too small," she said one night, pointing her fork at me for emphasis. Dave and Julia are planning to steal your clients. Fine, so you expand into markets they can't touch. Commercial projects, municipal contracts, things that require established credibility they don't have. That's ambitious. So are you, Emily smiled. You just forgot for a while. The formal divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a process server who looked uncomfortable doing his job. Julia had hired some attorney I'd never heard of, probably whoever she could afford now that she wasn't living off my income. I forwarded everything to Vilma immediately. She called back within an hour. Her lawyer's asking for half the marital assets and temporary spousal support. Amateur mistake. They're not acknowledging any of the fraud evidence we have. What's our response? We demand full financial disclosure from both her and Dave. Every bank account, every transaction, every communication about your business. We make them show their cards first. Perfect. Meanwhile, Gerald and I spent hours compiling evidence for Dave's criminal trial. Bank statements, transfer records, emails between Dave and shell companies he'd created. The prosecutor, Marcus Webb, told us the case was airtight. He's going to prison, Marcus said bluntly. The only question is how long. Friday evening, Emily invited me to an industry gala downtown. Show your face, she urged. Let people see you're not hiding. The ballroom was full of contractors, developers, architects, half the city's construction community. I felt eyes on me the moment I walked in with Emily. But something unexpected happened. Richard Morrison, one of my biggest clients, approached immediately. Eric, good to see you. I heard what happened with your partner. Want you to know that doesn't change our relationship. You've always delivered quality work. I appreciate that, Richard. Actually, my brother's company is looking for a contractor on a new development. I gave him your number. 3 more clients stopped by our table during dinner. All of them offered support, new projects, referrals. See? Emily leaned close, her perfume subtle but intoxicating. People know who you are. Dave can't take that from you. After the gala, I walked Emily to her apartment building. We stood on the sidewalk, the city lights reflecting in her dark eyes. Thank you, I said, for everything these past weeks. Eric, I'm not being charitable. She stepped closer. I've wanted to do this for a long time. When she kissed me, I felt something I hadn't in years, genuine connection, not obligation, not routine, something real. I'll call you tomorrow, I promised when we finally pulled apart. You'd better. I was still smiling when I pulled into my driveway 20 minutes later. Then I saw Dave's car parked on the street. He was sitting on my front steps, looking like he hadn't slept in days. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. What the hell was he doing here? The morning after I found Dave sitting on my steps, after I'd told him to get lost before I called the cops again, I was walking into the office when a sleek black Mercedes pulled into the parking lot. A man in an expensive suit stepped out, extending his hand like we were old friends. Eric Anderson? Seth Romero. I represent Dave Whitlock. I didn't shake his hand. You've got 30 seconds before I go inside. Seth's smile didn't falter. I think you'll want to hear this. My client is prepared to make a very reasonable offer to resolve this situation without further unpleasantness. Unpleasantness? I crossed my arms. Is that what we're calling theft now? Dave is willing to plead guilty to reduced charges, misdemeanor fraud instead of felony embezzlement. He'll return $100,000 immediately. Seth pulled a folder from his briefcase. In exchange, you drop the serious charges and we all move forward. He stole over $200,000. Half isn't good enough. Seth's expression hardened slightly. Consider the alternative, Mr. Anderson. If you insist on pursuing this, Dave will countersue for harassment and defamation. Your arrest of him was very public, very humiliating. We have witnesses who will testify you damaged his reputation without proper evidence. This could drag through courts for years. Legal fees alone could bankrupt your company. My jaw clenched. That sounds like a threat. It's reality. Litigation is expensive and time-consuming. Dave's willing to make this simple. Take the deal, get some money back, move on with your life. He held out the folder. You've got 72 hours to decide. I took the folder without looking at it. I'll think about it. Smart man. Seth returned to his Mercedes, leaving me standing there with his threats ringing in my ears. At lunch, I met Gerald and Vilma at a downtown steakhouse. I slid Seth's settlement offer across the table. Vilma read it first, her expression darkening. This is garbage. They're trying to intimidate you. Is it? I asked. Could Dave actually drag this out for years? Gerald sighed, removing his glasses to clean them. Technically, yes. Anyone can file a lawsuit. It doesn't mean they'd win, but it would cost you time and money defending yourself. And if Dave gets creative with his lawyers, which he won't, Vilma interrupted, because their case is nonsense. Eric, we have ironclad evidence, bank records, emails, witness testimony. Dave stole from you and we can prove it. Any countersuit would be frivolous. But frivolous lawsuits still cost money to fight, I said quietly. That's what they're counting on. Vilma leaned forward. They want you scared. Don't give them that satisfaction. Gerald set down his fork. Eric, I understand Vilma's confidence, but I have to be honest about the risks. Extended litigation could run you $50,000, $60,000 in legal fees. Maybe more if it goes to trial. So, what are you recommending? Gerald hesitated. I'm saying consider all your options carefully. Think about what you can afford, financially and emotionally. Vilma's eyes flashed. Gerald's being cautious, which is his job. But I'm telling you, we can destroy them in court. Don't let Dave win by threatening you. I sat back, feeling the weight of the decision. Take the settlement and recover some money now, or fight and risk everything. That evening, I met Emily for dinner at her favorite Italian place. She knew something was wrong the moment I sat down. What happened? I explained Seth's offer, Gerald's concerns, Vilma's confidence. Part of me wonders if I should just take the money and be done with it. Move forward. Emily set down her wine glass, her dark eyes intense. Is that really what you want? I want this nightmare over. Eric, listen to me. She reached across the table, taking my hand. They tried to take everything from you. Your wife, your business partner, they conspired to destroy what you built. And now they're threatening you again, trying to make you back down. Her grip tightened. Show them who you really are. Don't let them win. It could cost me everything. You've already rebuilt from nothing once. You can do it again if you have to. But if you let them intimidate you now, you'll regret it forever. I looked at her, this woman who barely knew me but believed in me anyway. You're right, I said slowly. Of course I am. She smiled. Now eat your pasta before it gets cold. That night, I lay awake in my empty house, staring at the ceiling. Seth's folder sat on my nightstand, still unopened. I thought about Dave sitting on my steps, desperate, about Julia's smug face when she handed me those divorce papers, about every lie, every stolen dollar, every moment they thought I'd just accept defeat. By the time dawn light crept through my windows, I'd made my decision. The morning after I decided to reject Seth's offer, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Eric Anderson? The voice was deep, measured, familiar somehow. Speaking. This is Albert Taylor, Julia's father. I'd like to meet with you this afternoon if you're available. My grip tightened on the phone. Julia's father was a judge in the next county over, well-respected and notoriously strict. I assumed he was calling to defend his daughter, maybe pressure me to back off. What's this about? It's better discussed in person. Can you meet me at Riverside Country Club at 2 o'clock? Part of me wanted to refuse, but curiosity won out. I'll be there. I arrived at the country club 15 minutes early, expecting some kind of ambush. The place was all manicured greens and quiet money, the kind of establishment where deals got made over expensive whiskey. Albert was waiting in a private lounge, dressed in a crisp suit despite being off the bench. He stood when I entered, extending his hand. Eric, thank you for coming. I shook his hand, studying his face. He had Julia's blue eyes, but none of her deception. I'll be honest, Judge Taylor, I'm not sure what we have to discuss. Please sit. He gestured to the leather chairs. Once we were settled, he got straight to it. I know what my daughter did to you, both the affair and her involvement in the embezzlement. I kept my expression neutral. With all due respect, that's between me and Julia. Normally, I'd agree. But 3 weeks ago, Julia and Dave came to dinner at my home. He paused, his jaw tight. I overheard them discussing their plans. Julia wasn't just aware of what Dave was doing. She was actively participating. Feeding him client information, planning which accounts to target for their new company. My pulse quickened. You heard this? Every word. They thought I was out on the patio, but I was in my study with the window open. Albert's voice carried real disappointment. My daughter admitted to knowingly helping Dave steal from you, Eric. She laughed about it. I leaned forward. Why are you telling me this? Because despite Julia being my daughter, I'm a judge first. I've spent 30 years on the bench upholding the law. I won't support dishonesty and theft, even when it's my own child committing it. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. This is a signed affidavit detailing everything I heard that night. Dates, specific statements, witnesses to the conversation. I took the envelope, barely believing what I was holding. You're willing to testify against your own daughter? I'm willing to tell the truth. His eyes met mine. Julia made her choices. She knew better. I raised her better than this, but she chose greed and betrayal anyway. The law doesn't care about family bonds, Eric. It cares about justice. For the first time since Julia handed me those divorce papers, I felt something close to vindication. Thank you. This means everything. Don't thank me. Just make sure it counts. I called Vilma from my truck before I even left the parking lot. You're not going to believe what just happened. I explained Albert's offer, the affidavit, everything. Vilma actually laughed, a sharp, delighted sound. Eric, this is exactly what we needed. A judge testifying about Julia's direct involvement? Seth Romero's going to have a stroke when he sees this. So, we're solid for trial? Solid. We're going to annihilate them. That evening, I met Emily at the same Italian place. She noticed my mood immediately. Someone's smiling for once. I told her about Albert, the affidavit, Vilma's reaction. Emily's eyes lit up as I talked. I knew you made the right choice rejecting that settlement. You did, I admitted. I was ready to give up. Never again. She pulled out her tablet. Speaking of not giving up, I've been thinking about your business. You're going to win these cases, Eric. And when you do, you need to be ready to capitalize on it. What do you mean? I mean, expand. Open a second office, hire more crews, take on bigger projects. Dave and Julia tried to steal your clients. Prove they made a mistake by becoming impossible to compete with. I looked at her plans, her projections. It was ambitious, maybe even risky, but it was also exactly what I needed to hear. You really think I can pull this off? I know you can, and I'll help you every step of the way. When I got home that night, an official envelope was waiting in my mailbox. I opened it standing in my driveway. Court date, 1 week from today. I looked at that date, the day everything would finally be decided, and felt my resolve harden into something unbreakable. They'd tried to destroy me. Now I was going to show them exactly what they'd unleashed. On a cold Tuesday morning in late February, I walked up the courthouse steps flanked by Vilma Rodriguez and Gerald Wright. My breath came out in white clouds, but the chill I felt had nothing to do with the weather. Remember, Vilma said quietly, let the evidence speak. Don't let them bait you into emotion. I nodded, but my jaw was already tight with controlled anger. Inside, Judge Diane Wilson's courtroom was everything you'd expect. Dark wood, high ceilings, the kind of formal space that demanded respect. Judge Wilson herself had a reputation that preceded her, fair but strict, with zero tolerance for deception. Dave sat at the defense table beside Seth Romero, looking pale and nervous. His usual confident swagger was gone, replaced by the fidgeting hands of a man who knew he was cornered. Julia sat separately with her own attorney, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. Not me, not Dave, not even her own lawyer. Good. Let her stew in it. The proceedings started with the embezzlement case. The prosecution, a sharp woman named Rachel Thornton, presented our evidence methodically. Financial records showing Dave's transfers, bank statements, witness testimonies from our accountant who'd helped me trace every stolen dollar. Then came Albert Taylor. Julia's father took the stand with the bearing of a man who'd spent decades dispensing justice. His testimony was devastating, calm, precise, unshakable. He described the dinner where he'd overheard Julia and Dave discussing their plans, quoted specific statements, provided dates. I watched Julia's face drain of color as her own father laid out her involvement for the entire courtroom. Seth tried to discredit Albert during cross-examination. Isn't it true you have a strained relationship with your daughter? Our relationship became strained when I learned she was committing fraud, Albert replied evenly. Before that, I loved her very much. That shut Seth down fast. When it was Dave's turn to testify, he tried his old tricks, the charming smile, the reasonable explanations. The transfers were temporary borrowing. I intended to pay it all back once our expansion plans— Our? Vilma interrupted. You mean the competing company you were planning with Mrs. Anderson? Dave stammered. That's not— yes or no, Mr. Whitlock? Were you planning to start a competing business using Mr. Anderson's client contacts? The silence stretched. Then, barely audible, "Yes." "And did you steal over $200,000 from Anderson Construction to fund this venture?" Dave's shoulders slumped. "Yes." By the time lunch recess hit, Dave's case was in ruins. But we weren't done yet. The afternoon session focused on the divorce and Julia's involvement. She took the stand wearing a conservative navy suit, her hair pulled back, trying to look innocent. Vilma started gentle. "Mrs. Anderson, when did you first learn about your husband's business partner embezzling funds?" "I didn't know anything about it until Eric confronted me." "Really?" Vilma pulled out printed emails. "Then how do you explain this message you sent to Dave Whitlock on January 15th, 3 weeks before you filed for divorce, where you wrote, and I quote, 'Once we have enough transferred, we can make our move'?" Julia's face went white. "That was taken out of context." "What about these recordings?" Vilma nodded to the bailiff, who played Macy's audio files. Julia's voice filled the courtroom, discussing client lists, transfer schedules, the timeline for leaving me. I watched Julia crumble in real time. Her hands shook. Her voice wavered. "Did you or did you not provide confidential client information to Dave Whitlock?" Vilma pressed. I was just..." Julia's eyes filled with tears. "Dave said it wasn't really stealing, that Eric owed him for all his work." "Answer the question." "Yes," Julia's voice cracked. "Yes, I gave him the information. Yes, I knew about the money. Yes, we were planning to leave together and start our own company." The courtroom went silent, except for Julia's quiet sobbing. "And the affair?" Vilma asked, almost gently now. 6 months, Julia whispered. "We'd been together for 6 months." By 4 o'clock, Judge Wilson called for a recess to review all evidence before delivering her verdict. "We'll reconvene tomorrow morning at 9, she announced. I stepped outside into the cold, my mind spinning with everything I'd just witnessed. Emily was waiting by the entrance, exactly where she'd promised to be. She didn't say anything, just pulled me into a hug. "It's almost over," she said quietly. Through the courthouse windows, I could see Julia sitting alone on a wooden bench inside. Dave had disappeared during the break, probably with Seth, planning damage control. She sat there abandoned, exactly like she'd planned to leave me. The irony wasn't lost on me. The next morning, I sat beside Vilma in the courtroom, watching Judge Wilson review her notes. The room felt smaller than yesterday, the air thick with anticipation. Emily sat in the gallery behind me. I could feel her presence like an anchor. Judge Wilson looked up, her expression unreadable. "I've reviewed all evidence presented in this case. Mr. Whitlock, please stand." Dave rose on shaky legs, Seth beside him looking defeated. "I find you guilty of embezzlement, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty," Judge Wilson stated flatly. "You systematically stole from your business partner over a period of 8 months, totaling $214,000. You will repay the full amount, plus damages totaling an additional $100,000. Additionally, you are sentenced to 18 months in county jail, with possibility of early release for good behavior after 6 months. Dave's knees buckled slightly. Seth caught his arm. Judge Wilson turned to Julia. "Mrs. Anderson, stand." Julia rose, mascara stained and hollow-eyed. "Your participation in this fraud is equally reprehensible. You violated the trust of your marriage by providing confidential business information to Mr. Whitlock, knowingly participating in a scheme to defraud your husband." Judge Wilson's voice was ice. "In the matter of the divorce, I'm granting full ownership of Anderson Construction to Mr. Eric Anderson. You will receive no assets from the marital property. Furthermore, you will pay Mr. Anderson's legal fees in their entirety, totaling $68,000. Julia's face crumpled. "Your Honor, please." "I've made my ruling," Judge Wilson said firmly. "Court is adjourned." The gavel's crack echoed through the room. As people filed out, I stood and straightened my jacket. Julia remained at her table, Seth having abandoned her to deal with Dave's sentencing details. I walked over slowly. She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. "You tried to destroy me on my birthday," I said, my voice calm and cold. "Instead, you lost everything." Julia opened her mouth, but no words came out. What could she say? The truth was sitting right there between us. I turned and walked away, Emily waiting for me at the door. 1 year later, the construction company had doubled in size. We'd landed 3 major commercial contracts and expanded our team from 12 employees to 30. The office had moved to a larger building downtown, with Emily's name on the door right next to mine. not just as my fiance, but as my business partner. She'd brought fresh ideas, new connections, and an honesty I'd been missing for years. I was reviewing quarterly reports when my phone rang. Marcus Brennan, an old industry contact. "Thought you'd want to know," Marcus said. "Saw Dave Whitlock working at that car wash on 5th Street, the one with the hand-drying service." "Yeah?" I kept my voice neutral. "Guy's radioactive in this industry. No one will touch him. Heard he served 6 months, got out early for good behavior, but his reputation's done." I thanked Marcus and hung up. Felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity. Just closure. That afternoon, Macy stopped by the office. We'd stayed in touch over the year, her testimony having been crucial to the case. "Julia moved to Arizona," she said, accepting the coffee I offered. "She's working at some diner, living in a studio apartment. She called last week, asked if I could loan her money." Macy shook her head. I said no. "How'd she sound?" "Broken." Macy sighed. "I love my sister, but she made her choices. Dad tried to warn her, tried to get her to settle before the trial. She wouldn't listen." After Macy left, I stood at my office window, looking out at the city. That evening, Emily and I went to the same restaurant where we'd had our first real date, a year ago, when my life was still in pieces. "Can you believe it's been a year since the verdict?" Emily asked, raising her wine glass. "Feels like a lifetime ago." I reached across the table, taking her hand. "You know, if someone had told me that night, when Julia handed me those divorce papers, that a year later I'd be sitting here with you, with the business thriving, I wouldn't have believed them." Emily smiled. "You built this, Eric. You didn't let them break you." I pulled the small velvet box from my jacket pocket and set it on the table between us. Her eyes went wide. "I've spent the last year rebuilding everything they tried to take from me," I said, opening the box to reveal the ring I'd chosen last week. "But the best part of rebuilding was finding you. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Emily said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, absolutely yes." Later that night, driving home with Emily beside me, I thought about those divorce papers. How different my life would have been if I'd just signed them out of shock or exhaustion. But that's not who I am. When someone tries to take what you've built, what's rightfully yours, you fight back. You gather your evidence, you stand your ground, and you make damn sure they face consequences. I fought back and won something better than revenge, a life built on honesty, respect, and true partnership. I believe stories such as this find us for a reason. If this one touches you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day. In the meantime, there are 2 stories on the screen that are even better.